Hello, everybody, and welcome back to today's live. I'm super excited to be back live today. And today we're going to be talking about PCOS and fatigue and why does it happen and what even fatigue is. So stay tuned. Right, so let me get my position here. I think I'm gonna have to actually move to another position. Let me change my position then. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about PCOS and fatigue. I know I haven't been live for a while. Hopefully we're gonna be a little bit more consistent nowadays. Let me just move myself. Where am I moving? Just like this. We're going to be discussing fatigue and PCOS today, which is probably something that a lot of us with PCOS have struggled with in the past. So let's do this, guys. So what is the difference between tiredness and fatigue? This is probably something that we should address as a first thing, because a lot of people now use the word fatigue too often, and every time they're tired, they're like, oh, I'm fatigued, oh no, oh, I'm so fatigued, this, that, and the other. And of course, fatigue and tiredness are two completely different things. And the main difference is that tiredness, you see, I already did it myself almost. Tiredness happens to every person, and tiredness is a natural thing that we are experiencing, right? So tiredness is something that you and me might feel at the end of the day when we had an intensive day, or after very intense exercise, when we have strained ourselves a little bit. Oh, good. Video and audio is great. Good to know. Tiredness is absolutely natural, and it happens to everybody, especially if we have strenuous day or we have been up for a long time. It is also expected after certain activities like sports, of course, like all sorts of physical activities, stress, etc., and also can be resolved by sleep. And this is probably the most important thing that you should remember, that tiredness is something natural that goes away when you sleep. And why is that important? Because fatigue is completely the opposite. So the thing is that the feeling of fatigue and tiredness sometimes can be a little similar. However, tiredness, I would say, feels healthy. Fatigue feels like you're ill. So fatigue is basically daily lack of energy that is repeatable. And it doesn't have to be day by day, but that is something that appears and it's during the whole day. And your whole body has a lack of energy. It is not relieved by sleep. So no matter how much you rest, no matter how much you sleep, you still feel fatigued. It can be acute, so it's less than 1 month, and this is probably after something that is acute, like trauma, surgery, some sort of disease, etc. Or it can be chronic, that is 1 to 6 months or even longer, and it can affect the quality of life. So fatigue is something that is a little bit more prolonged, that is not something that can be resolved by sleep, right? So if you see yourself being tired over and over again, and no matter how much you sleep, no matter how much you rest, you're totally, constantly exhausted. That's when we can talk about fatigue. Now, what can fatigue actually influence? It can, first of all, it can be completely debilitating because you have to struggle to do every even simple tasks during your normal life. You can have problems with your memory, you can have poor performance at work, and you can also have difficulty fulfilling your social and emotional responsibilities. We all have been sick before, so fatigue, I think, when I think about fatigue, is almost like, when you have a flu and you have to lie down and you have to fall asleep and you feel like it's not good, and you just can't work, you can't focus, stuff like that. This for me is fatigue. So every time I feel something as if I was ill, but I am not ill, then I know it is fatigue and not just tiredness. Now, very important thing to also consider, because today we're talking about PCOS and fatigue, but fatigue is very often associated with other disorders as well. So you can have something like chronic fatigue syndrome, you can have underactive thyroid, you can have anemia, nutrient deficiencies, mental health issues also can influence your energy levels and fatigue, and PCOS, which is indirectly. Now, I want to mention that This is super, super important because a lot of us, when we have PCOS, we tend to blame everything on PCOS. However, very often we might have stuff there, happening at the same time, especially that PCOS is 5 to 10% of women. Thyroid is something similar, 5 to 10, underactive thyroid is something similar, 5 to 10% of women. So it is quite a lot. Also, if you have mental health issues, which are common whether with PCOS or not, this heightened state of anxiety or depression can actually cause you feeling fatigue as well. So how can fatigue show directly in PCOS, and how are they connected? Very often in PCOS, first thing that happens is that we have sleep disturbances. And again, those symptoms that I'm going to be talking about do not happen for everybody. It is, of course, very personal. Some women have that, some women don't. I don't have a lot of sleep disturbances, for example, and I know a lot of people might do. And some is just because of insomnia and because of hormonal imbalances that can cause insomnia. And for other people is obstructive sleep apnea, which is very often also connected to obesity. And as we know, around 70% of women with PCOS are insulin resistant, and a big percentage of women with insulin resistance are obese. So sleep apnea can also be connected to PCOS and fatigue. However, sleep apnea, of course, and obstructive sleep apnea can be connected to other disorders, simply insulin resistance without PCOS, diabetes, general obesity, etc. So that is something very important to take under the consideration. Now, another thing is iron deficiency anemia. And anemia I mentioned before because it can happen with PCOS or without PCOS. However, in PCOS, very often women have very irregular periods, or they even skip periods as well. So, for example, if you're a woman who is not having periods or having periods very, very rarely, then there are bigger chances that after, your 60, 70, 80 days, or maybe 90 days, or however long your period was gone for, your period that is going to come is going to be very, very big. You're going to have a big period and you're going to lose a lot of blood. And that is because you might have a buildup of uterine tissue, with every regular cycle, let's say, you have specific amount of tissue that is building up and then, is being taken out with the period, with your period blood. However, if you don't have periods for longer periods of time, it might then end up with you having bigger periods. And I know that a lot of people struggle with that. You can see on a lot of PCOS groups that there are a lot of girls that have issues with that as well. So of course, when you lose a lot of blood, you might have iron deficiency anemia, and anemia is actually a cause for fatigue for many women. Again, whether with PCOS or not, some women just naturally have heavy periods, and then they struggle with anemia as well. I know people with my close proximity that also are struggling with it right now, and it is kind of genetic in the family. So, it might be that it is also that. But if you have anemia, so to diagnose anemia, you have to have blood tests, and from simple blood tests, you can see if you have anemia or not. Then you should ask your doctor for prescribing you iron deficiency, prescribing you iron supplement, and that should hopefully resolve the issue. Of course, working on regulating and stabilizing your periods, whether it is with different medication that can help you with that. If your period is not stable due to insulin resistance, managing your insulin resistance, etc., with your diet and rest and exercise. Gentle exercise, it should hopefully regulate at least to some point. Another thing is, as I mentioned, insulin resistance. And if you haven't seen my insulin resistance playlist yet, make sure you do, because I explain the full mechanism of how insulin resistance can actually influence our whole energy metabolism. If I can explain it very, very shortly, I'm always doing that. Where am I going here? God, I have overlays on the other side and I'm completely confused. Okay, so when we have the cell, there we go. We have the cell. Oh, there we go. We have the cell. right here. And you have to have, your glucose from your bloodstream going to your cell to create energy in your mitochondria. But the thing that is opening the entrance to your cell is insulin. It's like a lock, and the key is insulin, and the insulin is opening the gate. But if you're insulin resistant, that gate doesn't open, so the energy is actually not coming into the cell, and it's not creating energy. And very often this extra glucose is then being stored as fat, but your cells are still starving for energy, and therefore you can be fatigued and you can be super starving and hungry because your energy metabolism is completely skewed. You do not produce enough energy in your cells, right? And of course, it's not full blockage, because then we wouldn't be able to function, but it is to some point. So if you have insulin resistance, your cells might not take enough glucose, as I said, to produce sufficient amount of energy, and this itself causes insulin resistance. The worst part is, and I said this story to you, by the way, if you're watching, let me know in the comments, say hi, tell me where you're watching from. I always love to hear from you guys as well. By the way, you can send me super stickers now if you're watching on YouTube. That is also a super cool thing. Right. So if, what was I saying about insulin resistance? That I think, explained it a million times. And I also told you my story, how I was very energetic and I had problem with insulin resistance, but I tried to push myself, and I was eating 1,500 calories while having quite active job and working out 4 times a week. And it actually caused my insulin resistance to get worse. So even though I was a very active person, I had very low calorie intake. I stressed my body so much that my insulin resistance got worse. And on 1,500 calories, working out 4 times a week and having an active job, I was gaining weight. So this is what insulin resistance might do to you. And it got so bad that I ended up not working out, not doing any social things, just coming back from work, crashing very early, sleeping 10, 11 hours, sometimes even 12 every night, and just resting for about 3 months. So this is something that can definitely influence that. Also with my hypothyroidism, similar situation, although that also impaired my thinking. I will tell you that story about hypothyroidism at the end of the video for those of you who want to hang around and watch it. And if you're watching on a replay, also let me know that you're watching from a replay and where you're watching from. And do you suffer from PCOS fatigue? So another thing is clinical depression, and it is proven that many women with PCOS suffer with both anxiety and depression, and it's much more than a healthy women population. And this can, of course, increase fatigue levels. For any of you who ever have struggled with any sort of strong emotion, not even clinical anxiety or clinical depression, if you have ever went through something hard in your life where you had a, good cry, or you were just extremely sad, you had your heart broken, maybe you were anxious, when you feel very, very strong emotions, very often your heart rate is raised. So this is in case of anxiety, your heart rate is elevated, and of course it just takes your energy away, and it's also very difficult mentally, and it almost feels like you have a thunderstorm in your head. So after all, you're completely burned out. So anxiety definitely can influence your energy levels, and with depression, that you have just general low amount of serotonin in your body and low amount of the positive hormones. So you just generally feel fatigued because of your body's chemistry. Your brain's chemistry is also completely off. So both of those can definitely severely influence. Again, these are not things exclusively reserved to women with PCOS. However, very often those symptoms, as you know, are connected with PCOS as well. So we can have multiple of them at the same time. How wonderful. Now, the medication as well, medications. As you know, if you have been watching again my previous videos about insulin resistance, one of the most popular medications for PCOS is metformin. And metformin is very often used to control insulin resistance and androgen levels as a consequence of managing your insulin levels, and unfortunately it can cause B12 deficiency. So it is proven that it depletes your B12. So unfortunately you are going to have to make sure that you have right levels of B12. It's not that it's impossible, but you should monitor it often enough. And as we know, unfortunately, with the public healthcare or with whatever healthcare you have, very often having the regular enough blood tests is not as simple. So it's very, very important to talk to your doctor if they're going to prescribe you metformin. How can you avoid having B12 deficiency, and what would they recommend? What sort of supplement maybe they would recommend to avoid having this B12 deficiency? As you know, the other group that is very deficient in B12 are vegans, because B12 is exclusively in animal products naturally, and of course vegans very often take special shots, so those are available as well. So if you are going to be struggling with B12 deficiency, this is definitely something to think about. And that is basically it. That is fatigue and in PCOS. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're watching on Facebook, make sure you like my page. Now I want to tell you as well that you can support me by buying me a coffee. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Agata Pawlak, and you can support my channel by buying me coffee. I know that few of you did. It was so cool. I'm actually working on one video that is going to be again a vlog style, where I'm going to be testing something for anxiety and for relaxation and for general insomnia as well, actually, at the same time. So I could do that thanks to you, and I love you guys. And now I want to also quickly tell you the story about the fatigue that I have had, and how is it different maybe to fatigue in PCOS. So for example, when you have hypothyroidism, because I have both, and I have also endometriosis, by the way, for those of you who are new, fatigue with thyroid is a little bit different, because it's accompanied by different symptoms. So for example, for me, it was sleeping 14 hours a day and still being exhausted, sometimes forgetting what was I saying mid-sentence and not being able to finish my thought. I had hard time carrying the conversation with someone, because as soon as they asked me a question, I didn't remember what they asked me. And constant cold. This is the difference. I think the most visible difference probably with fatigue with the thyroid, that you are constantly feeling very, very cold, and you're very, very swollen. You're getting kind of swollen. So this is the difference with fatigue with the hypothyroidism versus fatigue with PCOS very often, because fatigue in PCOS very often is connected to hormones, to anemia, to sleep disturbances, and to anxiety and depression. Right, so that is it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye.